Next, the US economy is heading for its steepest decline on record because of the coronavirus pandemic. All this according to the people in the know at the Federal Reserve. America's central bank said it would likely keep interest rates near zero until the end of 2022 to support an economic recovery. Let's get more in-depth analysis. Business editor Kate Moody is awaiting us. Kate, good evening to you. The Federal Reserve didn't change much in terms of policy, but it gave a clearer picture of how it expects the economy to fare in the months to come.
In this case, the Fed's words were really more important than its action, or actually inaction. Back in March, the Fed had already cut its interest rates to between 0.25 percentage point in an emergency move. They will stay there for at least the next 2 years. Fed Chief Jerome Powell saying he wasn't even thinking about raising them. Bond purchases will also continue at a higher rate than usual. Now, the Fed published an economic forecast for the first time since December, saying the U.S. economy is likely to shrink 6.5% in 2020. That's a slightly more optimistic projection than the OECD's negative 7.3%, which was released earlier today. Despite that, Powell said that comparisons to the Great Depression were not appropriate, in part because of the swift and effective nature of the policy response this time around. He said the central bank will continue to do everything it can to support the economy, stabilize inflation, and boost the labor market, saying both the Fed and Congress were likely to have to do more. He described Friday's jobs report, which gave an unemployment rate that was lower than expected. He described it as a welcome surprise, but warned that millions of Americans are likely to stay out of the workforce for some time to come. All this painting a picture of a very long and difficult recovery ahead.
Kate, the Fed chief also touched on the protests that have swept the United States over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's fairly rare to see the head of the U.S. central bank weigh in on these sorts of issues. He described the country as dealing with tragic events, saying there is no place for racism in the Fed system or in U.S. society. Powell said the Fed remains committed to ensuring equal access to employment and credit for all Americans. Now, Black and minority workers do have higher rates of unemployment and lower wages than most of the American workforce on average. And Powell stressed that this pandemic has really laid bare a lot of issues relating to economic inequality, especially the fact that lower paid workers in the service industry in particular are facing more economic hardship than others.
Kate, as ever, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody, our business editor there.